Hello everybody, welcome back to episode 91 of the Podcana podcast. This week we're joined by Harlan, Sweete, a fellow content creator for Disney Lorcana. Has very much popularized the Kiwi Birds deck. If you guys are familiar with this deck, it's a blue steel deck. The first time I saw Harlan play it was actually at the EU Championships, where he performed very well with it. He was actually featured on stream as well, and there's kind of been some adaptations to the deck over time. There was a lot of testing that I saw Harlan do it, throughout set 5 and as the kind of meta evolved. And now as we move into not set 5, set 6, and as we move into set 7, I think it may be positioned to potentially be one of the best decks in the format. So Harlan, I'm going to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself, let people know who you are if they don't already know you, where they can find you on YouTube, your type of content.
Yeah, hi guys. If you don't know who I am, probably most of you don't. I'm quite like a Sapphire Steel gremlin. I like the nicest way to put it is a bit of a custodian over on my YouTube channel. Of course, the deck hasn't been that great for a few sets, but we still go through it and we try and document the successes. And there's just a lot of people who enjoy the deck. Me personally as well. We enjoy the color combo, what we can do with it. And it just hadn't been performing that well for a bit, so we invented this. Me and another player called Justin. It was mainly a lot of his work. He got the core of this thing called the Kiwi Birds deck. There is nothing the deck has nothing to do with actual birds or kiwis. What actually happened there was I nicknamed it that on my Dreamborn, and then when Inkdex went to take the content creator lists, they just took it from my Dreamborn and they put it up as Kiwi Bird, so now everyone just calls it that, which I'm fine with. But the idea of the deck was just to play a really strong curve with Sapphire Steel rather than ramp into Dime, into Tinkerbells and try and control the board. So in the past set we were just doing that with Alice into Pluto. As long as we hit that 1, 2, 3, 4, finish it with a Cogsworth, play some docks, that was great. But in this set, we've got Belle, and we just basically have to capitalize on that card. It's insanely powerful. It means we have to put the items back in, but I think this is the set. If you're into Sapphire, this is the set for you. There's going to be a lot of people who aren't going to like it, I think. But yeah, I think this is going to be an awesome set.
I think it's a really cool callback, actually, because I remember the first time myself and Moyen actually met you, Harlan, was back at a set 3 tournament in Poland, where at the time, I remember I even played Sapphire Steel. And I think you played it as well, Moyen, right? It was kind of the hotness at the time. It was kind of the first time it was really being shown off. So we're really coming
What set was that?
It was set 3 meta, right?
Set 3, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of the time Sapphire Steel kind of gets this, especially Sapphire Steel players always say, oh, how bad their colors were in all the sets. And then when you look back at history, I think set 2 it was insane. Set 3 set 3 and set 4 I think it was really, really good. I think set 5 it was the best deck in the game. I like the no wheel blue steel. And then last set I think it was the set 1 and set 6 were the 2 sets where I think it was a little bit subpar in comparison to the meta decks. But in all the other sets I really, really like blue steel.
Yeah.
Yeah. I find with the deck, it always takes a little bit of time for people to crack it. Especially through of course we document a lot of Sapphire Steel lists on the channel, and yeah, by the end of the set, like you say, with that no wheel list, it seemed to come together and it seemed to work quite well. Because I believe at the start of the set, I don't think you were playing it too much, were you, more? And I think Sky was on it.
At the start of which set?
Set 5, when it was we played it in Seattle.
Yeah, no, set 5. Well, at the start of set 5, I really wasn't on it.
Yeah.
And then it took me a while to even revisit the color combination and see that it can actually fight off all of the problems of the meta quite well. But yeah, for a while I really, really wasn't on it, and I didn't think too highly of it.
Yeah.
With this deck, it's I'm almost a little bit afraid that I love blue steel, but I'm not sure I love this version of blue steel, because it's a lot more about curving out. But I think next set, I do think with the Bell, the Flower Charms, the deck gets a lot more interesting than just hitting your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 curve.
For sure, yeah. But yeah, we're going to be diving into the deck a little bit deeper as we move throughout the episode. But first, we're going to jump into the Spilled Ink section. This is our listener question section. If you guys will have your questions read out on next week's episode of the podcast, be sure to pop a comment down below, or also join our Discord server, which is in the link in the description. The first comment is from Mono TNT. They say, I play strictly 61 cards just because I know every time I start a game with that, Brendan gets a grey hair. Yeah, the reason why Brendan's not here is he's just recovering at the moment from all the times you've played 61 cards. He just cannot handle it.
He's recovering from that comment getting 15 likes. And it's like, yeah, no, I'm not doing it again. It's almost like I always hope we'd have like a net positive influence on the community. But if we make people play 61 cards, I'm not sure that is the case.
Yeah. The next comment is from Commander Paratus. They say, I'm hearing a lot of discourse and hype about the new Bell, which I do personally think is very strong. My question is just how meta warping do you think it will be? A follow-up question is, if it is very meta warping, can you tech for it? Do you try to beat them, or do you join them? I think we have the perfect people on the podcast for this question, honestly, because I know, Harlan, like, you've been testing with this card for, I mean, probably like theorizing about this card well before it was actually revealed, because we got the starter decks early, right? So like, you're probably, I remember the first time I looked at this card, I was like, oh my god. And then I was like, I was waiting for everyone's reaction, where I was like, people aren't ready to see this card. So
Yeah, I remember with that, like, because we got the starter decks early, and a few of the other people who got the starter decks messaged me on, like, this is your card. You're gonna love this card.
yeah.
And yeah, I think there's 3 in the starter decks. We got it out and proxied 1, and it was like just played with my partner Ali like every night. And I'll admit, if you're playing a set 6 list or whatever, because that's all she had built, into like turn 1 Bell thing strength flip story, it's not a very fun night. You know, a lot of arguments can be had. And yeah, I think the card's busted. I think it does need to hit the mainstream, and like we do need lots of data to know actually how good or bad it is. But it has that feeling of that turn 1 Cindy, turn 1 Diablo, but it's also a 3/3. So like there's thing with Cindy, when she turns sideways, you just run a Calhoun in and take her out. This card, you just 1/1 if you run a Calhoun in. So it's just really quite strong, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And do you think it's pretty much the, obviously, like, it's a very big question, right? The set's not even out yet, but for the most part, like you said, Harlan, right? Like, there's not a real way to tech for it that I can necessarily see. So is it like, yeah, sure, you just kind of join them, like you're on the same train, you could have a similar opener. Like, do you guys feel like there are any options to necessarily tech for this, or it's just a very strong opener that you can't really, you have too much control over? If they hit it, they hit it. If they don't, they don't, right?
I find it's still a high roll in the sense that you need to get the item and then the bell as well. So you don't hit it like 100% of your games. And of course, you don't hit 100% of your games in like any card in Lorcana. But yeah, in testing, we're at this point, we're not sure what you do when a 3/3 is played on turn 1. Of course, there'll be decks like Ruby Sapphire that can kind of just ignore it in a sense and just go, I'll just keep ramping and do what I usually do anyway. Cool, you get some lore at the start, but I'm not going to give you any targets to attack. It just feels like they got a really powerful card. I don't really know how you tech or counter around it. Maybe just play I think what most people say is play your own turn 1 Bell.
Yep.
Like, that has been the common answer to that question.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit, I mean, okay, Cindy wasn't as bad, right? Technically, there were some answers to Cindy with like fire the cannons. But still, for most decks, the answer to Cindy was, oh, maybe I have to play less cards in the early game and wait until I play bigger cards that don't just get overwhelmed by like Storm Rage on. But then sometimes they just overwhelm you with strength and you lose. So, but I think, yeah, the main way to tackle Bell would not be to engage in this like early game combat, and instead like just concede the board for a little bit, maybe gain it back with once you go to like Maois, or you draw cards into like until you beat prep. So it really depends on what else is the Bell deck trying to do, right? Is it a deck that when I concede the board, they overwhelm me and just win very quickly, or is it just like a late game deck that uses this as their anti-aggro tool? So it very much depends on that, if you have the liberty to just ignore it, or if you lose by ignoring it.
Yeah, no, I think those are some great points for sure. Sorry, continue, Harlan.
Oh, yeah, no, in testing, like more 100% correct. It's like you can use this card as like an anti-aggro tool if you're playing like a standard ramp Sapphire Steel, and you just pop on turn one to say like all the other quick low to the ground decks, I'm going to stall you, and then I'm going to get to what I usually do. But of course, in the Kiwi sort of low to the ground build that I've got, been working with, it's like if you play Bell turn one, and then she's got some songs to sing in your hand. Turn two, you play a Smee, and you'd be like, I'm just going to protect this Smee. It's going to keep questing. Then you get the Alice out, start questing with that. Like, she is a pretty versatile card and what she can do as well.
Yep, yeah, definitely. I wonder. I think this suddenly makes. I mean, I assume this suddenly makes like a low to the ground Sapphire Steel deck maybe the new best anti-aggro deck, right? I'm not sure how any aggro deck suddenly can win board against these openings. What I'm interested in, because I think first expectation might be Ruby Sapphire and Sapphire Steel to be the two most played color combinations, at least at the start of the next set. How much does it like improve the Ruby Sapphire matchups? Because against Ruby Sapphire, it's still a character that quests for one, and then it's like a little bit beefier a little bit later. But like, how much does it actually impact that matchup? I'm very curious about.
We've done that quite a bit in testing, and I think the Sapphire Coil as well has scared quite a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So we've all gone back to testing Benja because the Coil as well, it's such a... Something costing 2 ink rather than 1 doesn't make it quite clunky to play. It's not like you can just play it on the curve. Like you'll be like, I play Sail, then I just put an ice block down. So some are trying to play the Coil on 2, so you can start using the Sisu and the Burals. But if you play Benja on that, they've now missed their, they've missed their turn 2 ramp. They've got nothing really to start contesting the board, and you can win. But yeah, the Bell on turn 1 versus Ruby Sapphire doesn't do a great deal of things there. Like it quests for 1 the same way that if you played like a 2/2 Robin Hood on turn 1, it's going to be a little bit more annoying to remove, but it will still be removed eventually. So yeah, it doesn't shine amazingly there.
Yeah, because I'm still thinking about like in Ruby Sapphire, I think like an action heavy version will still be quite relevant. So what if they still just like ramp on 2, play either Goofy or Tala on 3, then play like Wash Maui. Yeah. It's usually how Blue Steel started to struggle, but now this deck also has like a lot more refill with all the card draw options that it can now play, in part because of the Bell, but also the new Tamatora.
Yeah, I haven't tested a lot of Amethyst Steel against this new kind of Sapphire Steel list, and when I was on the draw, it was like particularly tough to just kind of gain even somewhat of kind of board control back, or like putting your opponent on the back foot, because I mean Calhoun is like probably the best card that deck can play on the draw to at least like it could take out the Bell, but then if they're taking out the Bell, then their other stuff is going to survive. And there's also the Cobra, right, which if the songs are sung by Bell to take out the Cobra or whatever, it doesn't really matter that much. But just the idea of, a 4/4 being able to challenge into a 3/3 can be okay in a certain situation. I found that the Cobra to be quite good against the Alice as well. Like Cobra, Lawrence, that type of stuff. And I think, but at that stage I was testing against the Sapphire Steel deck without Plutos, and now I've seen that Plutos have kind of made it back in to purposely protect that Alice. It's very difficult to get over like that opening. Like if you go turn 1 item Bell, smear Calhoun into Alice into Pluto, it's like it's such a strong opener that it's pretty difficult to beat. But yeah, I've tried to do like a little bit of testing. And actually, since we were talking about Benja, I'm going to move into the next comment if that's okay. So this is from Diego Plays TCG. They say, to be honest, I don't think Benja will do much, since both Tamatoas, the 6 cost and 8 cost, can just bring back items back from the discard. In really specific scenarios, it might come in clutch, but that's about it. We'll see. So yeah, it was a good point, and I really I was fascinated by the point that you made there, Harlan, where I can see that exact situation being one of the rare use cases of where Benja like really, really shines. I spoke about it on last week's episode of the podcast where we were talking about like a Ruby Sapphire deck where you can have these kind of 2 openings now, right? You can do your traditional ramp on 2, or you can do this Sapphire Coil on 2 into a Sisu or a Brawl. And my conclusion was I think that the ramping on turn 2 majority of the time is still the better play, but against certain types of decks, maybe you do want to do the Sapphire Coil on 2 into the Sisu. And in that exact situation, the Benja, like you mentioned, is a great tool to kind of counter that. But besides that, how much do you guys feel like, because Benja hasn't really been seen within the meta too much. It was interesting. Like I remember back in like set 3, Benja was in there because he could, remove some of your opponent's items so they don't get to use their Hiram. Or it was also because back in the set 3 meta, there was a lot of like Amber Steel flutes and stuff. So there was like just like a general few other items that you could kind of target. But yeah, Benja's kind of fallen out of the meta. He's obviously still like a pretty decent card if you can hit a good item. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the card in general. Like, do you have any other thoughts besides what you mentioned, Harlan, about like, counteracting the opponent's Sapphire Coil?
Yeah, I mean, we went straight to Benja, and we looked at Judy Hops as well, because we thought Benja's just going to be quite useless half the time, so we might as well put one of our own Porpsicles and draw a card instead. But you don't want to be giving Ruby Sapphire another card. I think in general, someone said to me once as well, would you rather have your Smee get brawled, or would you like your Benja to get brawled? Because when you pop an Ice Block or you pop a Sapphire Coil, it's like kind of almost what you're making the choice on. But I don't really 100% agree with that. But we were found mainly with Benja, it's just like this constant threat that you can't just play a Sapphire Coil and get the instant value out of it is good enough. So maybe just a 1 or a 2 off in a deck is fine, just to keep it, sort of kind of to scare people in the meta, sort of make them think, oh, I can't just play this down because what if they have this and I just lose so much tempo and lose. And yeah, I don't think you play the Coil on 2. I think you do if you miss ramp, which is what people are mainly saying. Now you've got like 12 things to play on 2, but you kind of want to play a bit later on, a bit like when you think you're going to get some value out of it. Maybe that Brawl or that Sisu that turn. But yeah, Benja's been an interesting one. It's kind of like if he was a 3-2, I'd like the card a bit more, just because he goes straight into a Brawl Sisu target. So it's like you have to get the tempo from breaking the Coil early, because if you just play him later on, he's useless. And you're not breaking dimes with this thing. Like you've lost the game if you're at the point when you're using a Benja on a dime. So yeah, I think he's been interesting to test. And with Coil being so popular, like we've got to at least try something.
Yeah. Moyen, any thoughts on Benja in general?
Yeah, Benja is awful, hate him, but I mean, if it will be contextual whether he has to be played or not. It's just like an awful feeling of the card and like of putting that card into your deck, because you know how often he will be absolutely trash, and then sometimes he will be so good that he can like completely swing the game. But he's like, I don't like the card because I don't think it makes like for very interesting gameplay. Just makes for very swingy gameplay. But so I hope Coil isn't oppressive enough where we need to play Benja, but it might be the case.
Yeah. The last comment is from one of our Discord members. They say, with set champs recently concluding and no DLC announced, my local scene whittled down over the last month as people have less ways to engage with the game. I now only get to play/test by myself mostly, and have since thought about the concept of competitive teams. After some of the recent developments I saw on social media, Team Inkless brewing up Red Blue for EU champs, Labyrinth players leaving/joining Maelstrom, I seriously thought about the ups and downs of such organizations. I'd love to know if any of you guys have had any prior experiences with teams outside of the local playgroup. Is the concept integrated into Lorcana well enough already to seriously consider the option for competitive players? I think this is a really good question, because we have a few of these types of teams, like they've mentioned, Team Inkless and Labyrinth, which is now Maelstrom, within the community. And it's something I've always kind of looked at strangely at times from outside, because ultimately when I look at a team, the biggest thing I can see and the biggest advantage is kind of like, these people are players who enjoy the game at a competitive level. They want to test together, they're jamming games, they're doing brews. And yeah, like the question's interesting because it's kind of talking about that difference between just like, your local play group or your local testing group compared to a team. But yeah, for me, I still look at teams like that as just people who are testing together and playing a lot together, or if you want to kind of like represent the type of thing. I don't think we're kind of nearly at the level where, you know, when you think of like a proper professional team of players, like Lorcana we haven't hit that level yet. The closest we've seen is probably what's the group called, like World Class Cards, because that team just has a lot of money where they can just basically send their players to wherever they want to go to play tournaments. But there's different levels, right? Like you could say, oh, I'm on like a professional team for Lorcana, and it could literally just be like you and your mates testing. Is a team, oh, you have like an actual head of the team that has someone that does your social media stuff, that like pays for this, pays for that type of stuff. But yeah, it is interesting, and I'd love to hear your guys' takes on it. Maybe I'll start with you, Moyen, if that's okay, because I know you've been within, you know, like the card game scene for quite a while, and maybe even talking about the idea of teams from Hearthstone, if there was any around that time, would be interesting.
Yeah. We even had like team rankings for one season until they scrapped that again, which like brought actual like esports team into Hearthstone just to like immediately tell them, oh no, you can leave again. So what are my thoughts on teams in card games? I don't think they're necessary. I think like a professional team to like build a brand and everything can make sense, right? But if it's just to get to really be successful at a TCG, I don't really believe in teams. I think the strongest team you can have is to basically to have like people like to be, I don't know, to behave in a respectable manner, to play well enough where people respect you, and then you can like start to build a network of people that you trust, that trust you, that are good at the game, that know you are good at the game. And then you have like this network of people that you can exchange ideas with pretty much freely. You can hit them up when you're cooking something new. You can hit them up when you want to test a new matchup. When people in these networks can converse while not having an ego about what they're saying, right? No one's bullshitting each other. Everyone's actually trying to find out how to get better, how to build good decks. I think that's the best thing you can have. And while teams can help with that, I think they can also be a little bit. They can also easily fire back in terms of now if there's like a 5-player team and suddenly other people won't talk to players out of this team because they know all the 5 players will suddenly get all of that information. So now, okay, they have like a 5-player group and all of them can change ideas within this 5-player group. But now suddenly maybe you're a little bit cut off from other players. So yeah, it has its ups and downsides. I don't think it's really necessary whatsoever in terms of just wanting to be successful.
Yeah, I think there's some really great points, and I think like even as you're kind of talking through that, it's the concept of a team is interesting there, because everything you've kind of been describing is kind of just like, you know, it's a network and it's a friend group at the end. It's like if I know I was testing something, I can hit you up, I can hit Harlan up, you know, it's just the people you kind of trust and like, you know, you want to kind of share ideas with and stuff like that. This actually just brought up a very funny small story that you told before, Moyen, of, you know, one of the small negatives. I don't want to talk about the negatives too much, but it was just kind of a funny story where there's a particular card game, I'm not going to mention it at the moment, but there was like a group of people practicing for an event, a team, and they're all, you know, practicing the same meta deck or whatever, but then and they all like lock in their lists. Moyen, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
And then one of the guys is like, oh, I know what everyone's playing, and like switches to the deck that counters the meta deck that everyone on the team has brought. So like there's some stuff like that can happen as well, which, you know, like
it was crazier than that. It was not a meta deck. They like the entire team decided to bring like a really rogue off meta deck. And then for no reason, one of the guys in the team, after deck submission, everyone sees, oh, they countered the rogue off meta deck, so the rogue deck can never beat that deck.
Yeah,
was very funny.
A bit mad, but again, that's like, I don't know. At the end of the day, that just comes down to player's choice and just general. I mean, people can play whatever they want to play, right? But yeah, there's situations like that where funny things can happen. But the cool thing I like about teams in Lorcana is I'm seeing a lot more like local teams, which is cool. Like I know in it's like Neil and Bradley, right? I think it's the
Dudley boys.
The Dudley boys, right? Like that's really cool, you know, like a local group of players, people who attend. Like I like teams like that, maybe. And at the end of the day, it's probably no different from some of the more teams that have more of a brand or whatever. But I like the idea of kind of local play groups and people coming together and doing type of stuff. You know what I mean? It seems very on brand with the idea of Lorcana. You know what I mean? So
also, just about the comment, there was one part of it that I didn't know how to think about. It was like after the recent developments, he saw, or they saw on social media, Team Inkless pulling up Red Blue for UChamps, Labyrinth players leaving, joining. It's like, okay, the ups and downs. But I was thinking, I'm not sure the French Red Blue at Champs was like an up. I think that might have been a down too, because they really didn't perform well or this French version of Red Blue didn't perform well at all at the Champs, and then in big part because like suddenly the entire room knew that like 80% of the French players are on very similar Red Blue lists.
That was the most fun with the Team Inkless team. They were like all on that same list, because if your melee came up and it said Inkless whatever, or the person you were sat next to had during the LCQ had like an Inkless shirt on, there was like one guy next to you would always be like, "Oh, do you want to just see their list?" Like I never got paired of any, but like because it was shared out so much.
Yeah.
I never played into any and got to see their list before it, but they were like, yeah, it's like they might be 2 card difference, but they're pretty much all on the same list.
Yeah.
That was I don't think that benefited them that much there.
Yeah, and then it happened on Lorcanito as well, right? Where people were playing like with their, oh look, I'm on Team Inkless, and it's like, I don't know, man. It's it's funny. It's funny.
And in Champs itself, I played against, I think, a French player that was also on Red Blue, and after the game I asked them, okay, did you prep Team Inkless? And he's like, no, I prepped myself, and it was like very, very similar Red Blue list again, even if they didn't prep together.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I played like 1 or 2 cards different, because I was like, okay, I guess my deck has to answer manas at some point in the mirror. So, like, if I wouldn't have known, my deck would have been worse against manas. And then maybe their deck idea does work. But then when, like, I don't know how many people, but it was a lot of, like, a big portion of the champs are playing it. Of course, you have to adapt to it.
For sure, yeah. Okay, yeah. So that was the spilling section. Again, if you guys want to have your questions read out on next week's episode of the podcast, be sure to leave a comment down below. We're gonna navigate over to this slide, if that's okay, lads, and we're gonna just do some further discussion on the deck. I know we've kind of talked about it a lot already, but yeah, just like your general thoughts on the blue steel deck now, Harlan, after testing it pre set 7, some of the things you're looking forward to trying with it, and maybe just like some general matchups for people. I mean, I know that the most interesting one, like we were discussing a lot, right, is like how it fares against a deck like Red Blue, because I think Red Blue will be quite popular at the start, but maybe for some folks who weren't too familiar with this type of build of blue steel from the previous set, maybe just like a rough overview of maybe some of the advantages and disadvantages of the deck.
Yeah, so the set previous, like, we were just playing a strong curve, that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And as Moyen said at the start, there was a lot of Sapphire Steel players who just weren't really into this. And I get it. If there's no way you want from your color combo, I completely get it. There was a lot of like die-hard Whole New World players as well, who I love all you guys out there, but they will just not put that card down. Like, they're just fully convinced it's the best card to play, and that's fine. That's completely fine. But we just feel like we weren't getting the results with it, so we went for this sort of just play a strong curve, and you end up just getting a lot of lore. You're outvaluing them at every corner. Of course, the deck could live or die by the mulligan in set 6, because we didn't really have any draw power. We didn't really have a way to get back into the game. And then eventually Bell got like shown to us in those starter decks, and of course we had to cook. with that, and we've had to put the item package in, and we want to try the song package as well because it just means our high roll from Bell is even better. And you will have games where you don't get Bell on turn 1, but the songs can still be sung by quite a lot of the deck anyway, so it's fine. But yeah, we're really just trying to go for that strong curve here, that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, get the Alice into Pluto. Giving stuff ward is pretty great, especially when Steel's popular, and even when what's it called? So Ruby Sapphire is popular with its targeted removal. A lot of the games I won, I think like the final game as well I won at that content creator champ was Alice Quest Ward Gantu versus Alphos, who was on Sapphire Steel, and then he can't touch. There's like literally, I think it's like Tink and grab your swords or whatever. Like it's a real hunt for the cards you need to get that removal in. So we kind of just carried that over, but we've had to use the item package. With the Hirams and the docks in this build, it's just like you're so overwhelmed with card draw and flood. You can get these like crazy card draws where it's like you can get the 6 ink, play dock into a Hiram, into play the Hiram, and you've gone 2 characters wide, then you've got a bunch of cards in hand for the next turn. You can just flood some more. So it's carrying a lot of that over. The new Tamatoa is, as a tempo card goes, like probably like the best card in the game, I think, for tempo swinging. What you get from that, you will be popping the Porp scores along the way with like Bell and Hiram, and then you get a payoff from that when they return to your hand with the Tamatoa. You get to play them again to draw more cards. If you have a Hiram, you can benefit even more, and you'll just be at a point where you'll always be fairly good on resources, and your opponent might have had to react to everything you do, and they do have the answers, but eventually you're just going to out-resource them. You're just going to be ahead on everything. You'll be ahead on lore as well, and just outvaluing them. So yeah, I think this build, if you look at the set 6 builds, is like completely different, but we tried to carry a lot of the cores over of like playing a strong curve. And I think you definitely could add, like Justin, the guy I made this deck that work on these like Kiwi decks with, like he's tried to introduce Sail, like just to give it so you can unlock some more expensive cards, some like 6-7 cost cards, and play them at a higher count. Which I don't dislike. I think if we had like way more time testing, we could have really went in on that and seen how good they are. But yeah, this deck's just all working around value, and this is why I pre-ordered my Tamatoas, because I think they're at like £32. I don't know what is that in other currencies, but I have a feeling they're going to be like Diablo prices. They're going to be quite expensive. It's just such a strong card, and there's theoretically two decks that could use this card as well, rather than Diablo, which was just one. So yeah, that's sort of kind of what the whole deck's trying to do. We just want to play this strong curve, outvalue them, and just win with a lore race.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I'll give my thoughts again. I say as a non-Sapphire player of how I think the meta will go and as things start off. So yeah, like prediction is I think this deck will be seen quite a lot. I think there'll be a lot of Ruby Sapphire, and as I am a fan of playing Amber Emerald, I was thinking a little bit and saying, okay, maybe Amber Emerald could be in like an interesting position in the next set. Obviously, didn't get too many new additions, but previously when I played against this deck in set 6, it was challenging because obviously a lot of characters have 3 strength and 4 strength, like when you have like the Gantus in it and stuff like that. And even with the spell, it's going to be a little bit tougher. But at its core, this is still very much a board-based deck, which Amber Emerald usually feels quite favored into. Like Blurple is a deck that goes, really wide on the board. You kind of get your Keto under the sea, you're pretty much winning. But now with this version, I feel like it's even more difficult for me to really, again, it's still very board based, but now that you're introducing the item package and the Hirams and the docks, like you said, there's just way more card draw that this deck has access to, resources that, I could do a swing turn where I make you discard stuff, you draw into like a chain of cards and you're just like back into the game. Mana, of course, is a difficult card to answer. Most of the time I'll need like a Cricky there. But the reason I'm even only speaking about Emerald at the moment was, initially my mind is, okay, if we see a form of this blue steel deck be quite popular, if we continue to see the DKP red-blue list continue to be popular, I've done a lot of testing of Amber Emerald and I found that it's quite, I don't want to say quite favored, but I felt decently favored into the matchup because it's very action heavy and stuff like that. So I was, again, like, the point I'm trying to make was I was trying to come at the meta from another angle to see, okay, what other decks actually have a decent shot at beating, this blue steel and new red blue decks as well. Like, I'd be curious to hear both of your guys' thoughts on just Amethyst decks in general, right? Be that Amethyst Emerald, Ruby Amethyst. How do you think those like decks will fare against this? And if you've done any testing against them in general?
I mean, intuitively, they just seem too fair and slow, and they get out tempoed, and they don't have a great late game. It's like, I don't know, maybe Purple Kingdom, Amethyst Kingdom is over.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Harlan? Have you done much testing against Amethyst decks?
Yeah, I think. I mean, Amethyst Steel is still going to be, as like you both two state, it's going to be a just very fair deck. Like, nothing it does is sometimes, like, if you're playing into it and you're a steel deck and they play a genie, it can be like, well, that's going to be a bit awkward to remove. But that's about it. They don't do anything amazing. The Cobra is good. Like, you can go. You've got the White Rose, you've got like loads of ways to just burn. And I'm pretty sure there's a ton of Amethyst Steel players who think like they've cracked it and their deck is the best deck in the meta. But I don't think it's great. And then Ruby Amethyst didn't get anything. They still like struggle with a 2-drop besides Flynn. Like, if you don't run Flynn, I don't know what you run as your 2-drop really.
And Flynn is so much worse now when there's a 3/3 turn 1 sometimes.
You're going into that turn already being threatened with one extra. So I don't know. I say that deck doesn't survive, but I say that every set and it does, and then it goes and wins like a regional or whatever. So I'm pretty sure someone will crack it. And there's some interesting cards in there, but yeah, I think Amethyst, as Moyen says, it plays such a fair game. And like I say, I was testing against Amethyst Steel with my partner, and just turn 1 Bell. Like, if you're going into turn 2 with 2 3/3s, like a Smee and or a Calhoun, like, yeah, you sing a song, they run their you've still got your other 3/3 on board, then you just play another 3/3 on 3 cost on turn 3. You're just gonna out tempo them and outvalue them.
For sure, yeah. I think it's worth noting as well that one of the cards that you have as a 2 in this deck is the John Silver, which is a card that has been moved over from the set 6 build. Notably, it's actually quite an interesting card to counter Maui Shark, but now, like, because I think previously, right, like Maui Shark was a big issue for this deck in set 6 because this was the only real way to interact with it. Now you've got stuff like Storm Red John Strength. If you build up a big enough board, Strength can potentially deal with it. So in terms of like, how's the matchup against Red Blue now, maybe in that sense it's gotten a little bit better against the Shark, but overall, like you guys were talking about already, right, like Moyen said, you could kind of not really care too much about the early game, just get your like ramp up, get to your board clear and drain them out of resources. But yeah, like now that this deck has so much card draw, like I've been talking about, like I think it's gonna be interesting how that matchup fares. And it's so funny because like it's so funny because I know previously like the whole thing of like Blue Steel and Ruby Sapphire, it's like Ruby Sapphire is always kind of just dunked on the Blue Steel decks for the most part, right?
Yeah, I mean for the most part, I think no real Blue Steel in like set 6 was also like quite favored against Red Blue, but then afterwards, actually there was also a period where real Blue Steel last set was actually pretty good against Red Blue because Red Blue wasn't playing Quill, and then if you just hit like a Quill whole new world opening, you were like really, really favored to win that game. But the problem was real Blue Steel then had like the problem of losing to Genie. But okay, so against Red Blue, I think like just ramping into like any tempo 4-drop into like Rush Mauis still is like it's usually the best way Red Blue can fight off the aggression of low to the ground Blue Steel. But I think that's like, to me that's the biggest reason Pluto is always still included in these lists, is that the Maui doesn't just eat multiple things, it just like 1-for-1's the Pluto and you keep questing and then you're questing to game. But one way Red Blue could often get around that would be by like leaving their Tipo on the board, for example, to then bump the Pluto, play the Maui, still have the 6/4 that's the menace to the board. But I think now with the Bell Storm Rage on High Road and tools Blue Steel has, I think that could really help the matchup quite a bit. So like taking out the bumpers so that Maui has to also get banished when Maui challenges Pluto.
I'd say with like nearing the end of set 6, for Axion, if ever anyone's going to Axion, I've been playing Amber Steel Dock Mines, just because I played a lot of Sapphire Steel, so I want to play a different deck. And yeah, realizing like the song package of Let the Storm and Strength, how much control I can actually get into Ruby Sapphire, I'm always quite surprised. Like, and then you mix that with, as Moyen saying, of like this version of the deck where it's like, well, if Bell sings it on a Tipo, that means Pluto can stay alive. And then you've got things like, well, John Silver a Shark for this turn, and then next turn Strength Fit. Or what you end up doing usually is they run Shark into something, and then you finish it off with some of the song package, which is like, it's not the best. It's not like just hard casting a Zeus on a Shark, or like singing Zeus on a Shark. It's not going to do a clean job, but it's surprising like how far you can get with that, just with these 8 songs. So yeah, I'm kind of going into this list like, what I've learned from Amber Steel Dock Mines and the previous versions of Kiwi, and yeah, even just removing that Tipo, that means the Smee doesn't get hit with the Tipo or whatever, and John Silver as well being able to make that Smee doesn't get damage every turn because he's a captain. These things are really minor, but they're very important when you're facing like a Tipo Goofy or like a big Maui going to hit you on 5 as well.
Just one last thing, if you don't mind, Harlan, could I like pick your brain about a few things, I guess, about this list?
Yeah, sure.
So I guess going into set 7, I'll just go through some of the options where, there are some other good options as well that you could be running, and I just want to kind of get your thought process on why you've decided for maybe the cards and counts you've decided to play. So the first thing I want to talk about is the 1-drop slot. I think there's 2 things that I want to know. So I guess, what are the options you're considering for the 1-drop? Why did you decide for Mulan? But also, now that you have 8 items and Bell is kind of the high wall that you're mulliganing for, why did you decide to play exactly 4 other 1-drops? Why it could be 3 as well, it could be 2, it could be more than 4. It could be a mix of different 1-drops if you say, okay, sometimes a 1-2 stat line is better, sometimes a 2-1. So yeah, how did you come to the conclusion of playing like 4 Mulans at first? And that being said, of course, there's like a list before the set's even out and everything could change very quickly.
I mean, she's a new card. Like, we were trying the Simba before that does the exact same thing. But this one's a 2-1, which we thought the 2-1 was maybe a bit more important. Sadly, it is and it isn't when you go into a Tipo. Like, a 1-2 is more important than a 2-1 into a Tipo, as they just get a free removal. But if they're saving that for the Smee or the Pluto, you get a bit of value back from that. You do need another 1-drop, we think, because you will, when you play a list like this, we found you do heavy go for the Bell turn 1, the same way that I imagine a Emerald Steel player would go for that turn 1 Diablo, because it's so strong and it just tempo swings you so hard. So of course you need to go heavy mulligan for it. If you miss it, you still need something to play. I think on the play, you're fine if you just play a Porpsicle. You can miss playing a turn 1 character. You want to go for that Bell, but you could miss it and you'll probably be fine. But on the draw, against like even these Amethyst decks, if they're going to go 3 wide, like turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, play a 1-drop, and you haven't played anything, you've just played a Porpsicle, you fall very far behind. I think you could swap that out again for the Mickey Mouse, the one that I was playing in set 6, just because basically Sapphire Steel doesn't have that many good 1-drops. Like that is the truth. We don't have a lot of great ones. So like a 1-2 with resist 1, it's like it can kill a Chernobog and it's fine. And then why we've kind of landed on Mulan is it's just nice to cycle through the deck, get through. Like, Let the Storm Rage on is great, but it's not going to be amazing every time. And if you have an Alice, but you're going to play her and she's just going to be easily traded the minute she turns sideways, you might as well start like cycling a bit more. And then, of course, you've got 8 Porpsicles. You can just put them in the discard and cycle 1, and maybe you're going to get that 2-drop or that 3-drop that you need. So she's been quite interesting to test. But as you say, it's week 1. The set isn't even out yet. Like, there might be a chance that she doesn't stick around.
It's like week 0.
Yeah.
I guess one of the things I like about 2 strength is maybe in this meta you can like quest against Smee.
Yes, yeah.
But the only issue is if they like curve into like any captain, then suddenly the quest looks very silly. So
we've also sometimes found like the human Sisu just gets like a free, like they're gonna play it if they're setting up the shift line, and they're probably gonna try reduce, do something else. But on the Simba or the Mickey, it's just so free for them to do it and then set
Right.
up to get the shift line. So just one extra strength sometimes is quite important.
Makes sense to me. Then the other thing is, now that the deck is playing the item package, and because of that it's playing like Flower Charm, I think its 4-cost singers look quite potent in terms of like they're not sacrificing much when they're singing. If for the Flower Charm, if you don't have an item, of course, and then the Pluto, they're both 1-questers, and then I think Shark is still a potent target, and the new Tamatoa, I assume, will likely be a very potent target for Zeus as well. Did Zeus already get any testing? How come there's no Zeus involved?
Yeah, no, I mean in this list we haven't, because we've just sort of I think like week 1 it's just been performing quite well. We'd want to get more data before we start adding Zeus in. But yeah, you're totally right. In this new set, the good thing about for Steel players is they've for some reason printed just a really good amount of Zeus targets. So you've got the Shark that's still coming over, Tamatoa that's around as well. Like you say, there's just loads of things that are worth Zeusing. I definitely could find some room for it in there. It's just where to look for, where to do more testing on. I think as well, there's always been a thing, like a discussion with some of the Steel players, like if you're running Zeus and a bunch of Steel removal, then John Silver kind of takes a bit of a back foot, because if you're just hard removing everything, you don't really need to stall anything.
Yeah.
Which I kind of agree with. So maybe John Silver could be going if we go for more heavy removal. But yeah, it's also with Hiram and Pluto, like you have just got a bunch of Zeus singers in there as well. So yeah, I think that's definitely the next testing to do.
Right, I think that makes sense. It's like the more Zeus you play, the worse John Silver gets. So it's like you kind of play either of them or like a mix of them, but you don't want to go overboard on stalling, because on stalling and removal, because if you can't be proactive because you draw too much removal, the deck kind of falls apart. Because of that, is the 4 count of Storm Rage on? Are you like confident in that, or is it? Do you ever struggle to get the singers online and would rather like play less copies, or is the high roll just like too strong?
We tried it at 3, but then it's like you're just really not committing to it. The high roll does feel that strong, I think, and as again, it's just playing a lot of Doc Mines. It's that if you don't get it from that turn 1 Cindy or that turn 1 Bell in this deck, by the time you get to 3, you've got singers ready, and you can start sending out there. Like you probably don't want to sing it from Alice. But if you play, like it's quite common in these low to the ground matchups to 1-2 play Pete, and then Pete will sing and make sure that they can't sing anything in return as well for that turn. So yeah, I think you just take that high roll. I think the high roll is too good to ignore.
I think that makes sense to me. It's like same thing in Emerald Steel, whereas you need to like set up a secure singer. Pete does that perfectly. Protects everything and then also provides a singer the turn after. And then the last thing is like, I think at least from a few voices I've heard, this might be one of the contenders for maybe one of the strongest decks of the next set. Like how do you tackle the mirror? Because I think historically the deck you always played Cogsworth. Is Cogsworth like a little bit too slow now? How much does it still help in the low to the ground blue steel mirror?
Yeah, I like you. I mean, you know Sapphire Steel quite well, and the mirrors, no matter what builds you're on, tend to always just suck, and then they're never that great. But I think Cogsworth would help, because, as you say, if you're going to build it to play this Tamatoa down, and then you're just expecting a Zeus, like Cogsworth giving it that 1 resist is good, but then also, because I've seen some people mention like Aurora and like other things to protect the Tamatoa, but Cogsworth is good in other scenarios as well. Like he's just a good card all round. So I quite like that. I think you would probably put. It's that thing though of like, how often are you going to see the mirror? If you are going to see it tons, like out of a 9-round event, you're expecting a good chunk of those to be at the mirror. Like, do you just play 2 Cogsworth, or do you go full in on the Cogsworth? Like, but yeah, Cogsworth is always one that people mention in the Sapphire Steel mirror. Of course, like the deck just hasn't been that popular for the last few sets, so like mirrors just haven't been a thing. But I think going into this set, you're right. it's not just from my testing groups as well. It's like loads of other people have come to the same conclusion that this sort of build works. And I'm pretty sure they've got like different versions where they're running different cards, but it's at the core. It's just like Bell turn 1 is amazing. Tamatoa is really good value. Like, and you can just win a board off that. Like Hiram as well, put him in there. Like Hiram's still really good. I think, yeah, you would probably have to put Cogsworth back in. It's just like, how much do you commit to the mirror? And then if you don't even see those cards in the mirror, or you don't even play the mirror, it's like they could be quite dead. But I think Cogsworth's a card where it's not going to be a dead card. It's only like dead into Ruby Sapphire, to be honest with you. Like everything else, it's sort of got value into.
Yeah, and even against Red Blue, it like depends on the build.
Yeah.
Right. If you play it against like a potential big C suit, then it's really, really dead. But outside of that, it's still a 2 quest that it sometimes protects some stuff. So I think that's really why Cogsworth kind of shines as a tech card, because it's just like okay in the matchups that it's not even meant for. But it's like really good in those matchups. But so far, really, it was a lot of the time, it was like a huge downside when Blue Steel was popular, because it was really, really difficult to get like a significant edge in the mirror. And if I'm looking at this list, if like suddenly this list starts playing 3 to 4 Cogsworth, I'm not sure how you can like skill gap the mirror too much, but I haven't played it much yet, so it's just one potential thing I'd be afraid of.
I remember like back in set 3, like when I'm thinking back to, you know, the old Blue Steel days, I remember games where people kind of memed about it a little bit, but it's like, oh, it's the Blue Steel mirror, whoever gets their Cogsworth first just probably wins the game. And I remember like my opponent doing like Cogsworth once, and I remember I just said like, yeah, GG, like I'm not playing the rest of the game. But yeah.
I remember talking also.
Just in my experience, a lot of the time you could like, if you lose the Cogsworth board, which means like you're losing the normal game, you usually just set like Giga Ramp to a Tamatoa, and if that doesn't get removed, maybe you can like sneak there with a dime. If it does get removed, okay, you still lose, but you were losing anyway, so it was like the one way to get out of it. What were you saying, Harlan?
I remember I talked to Jonathan Lamb in Seattle, because we got paired, and he'd done like 2 or 3 mirrors that day, which is mad. And we just really didn't want to do it too much. And I remember him saying that like he finds Aerial quite a bit more impactful in the mirror than Cogsworth is. I don't think he meant it was more impactful, because if you just get 1 or 2 Cogsworth down, you pretty much have 1. Like they're not going to touch that board. You're just going to out tempo them. But Aerial can be such a tempo swing. Like you could get to that 10 lore, and then you set up that like Aerial into dime removal, and then people try and add cards in. And I don't mean any disrespectful dislike with the cards like this, but like Arthur. I don't even know if you two have to search what that card is.
I would have to search what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. The Arthur Legendary, and it's like it can attack rated characters, so you can get your Cogsworth and Aerials removed. But it's like, do you run it as a 1x or a 2x? If you miss it, it can be quite a useless card. It's a big uninkable.
Or if I don't draw it, I'm happy. The problem is when I do draw that card, and then it's in my hand.
Yeah. I remember when it was released, and like, because I spent a lot of time in the discords for Sapphire Steel, it was like, oh, we've got this mirror breaker. It's so good at breaking the mirror, and it was just like, no. At the time you could play it, they might have even double Cogsworthed you, and then like you couldn't break the first one with like a 5, because you could buff a Smee, I think, because they gave it 2 extra. I don't love Arthur that much. I'm pretty sure I've probably upset a ton of Sapphire Steel players by saying that, but I don't think it was the mirror breaker we all expected.
Yeah, definitely wasn't that.
Can I touch on another card within Sapphire Steel? It's just you mentioned Jonathan Lamb as well. It's another card I know he's a fan of, which is the Pleakley. I don't think Pleakley necessarily fits into this deck, but just I'd like to hear both of you guys' thoughts on that card, because I know I've discussed it with Moyen previously, and the general consensus was like, you know, Pleakley's quite good with a 1-drop that gets an advantage for, you know, an effect when it's played, and then you can Pleakley it and it's kind of done its job. So I know previously Jonathan Lamb like paired it with, you know, the 1-cost Simba, would do a 2-drop and then do Pleakley instead of doing the ramp on turn 2. But have you guys given that card any more thought, or is that kind of what you think that card's meant to do? Is that kind of opener with those type of 1-drops, if that makes sense?
So to me, I've tried all the Simba Pleekly stuff, and I guess Mulan Pleekly is like the same thing. Tipo Pleekly is okay in slower decks, but I mean, in a fast deck, the problem is you also have to ramp into like a very, very fast 5-cost play. Right now, this deck doesn't even play a 5-cost. So it doesn't really make up for the tempo loss whatsoever. You can just like lose a body. The only time I really want Pleekly is if maybe I'm stacking my deck and I'm playing Amber Sapphire and I always go Pluto on 1, Pleekly on 2. That's insane. When that happens, GG. But I don't want to play Amber Sapphire. So don't like Pleekly.
But Moyen's already ready for Amber Sapphire when the time comes.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah.
I think Pleekly is, the body's nice, and that you're going to be able to start contesting these like 2-drops like Smee and Calhoun. Like they can't really freely turn sideways and do something. But yeah, what it has to put in the inkwell has to be like one of these looters or like a Tipo maybe. Like that'd be kind of nice. Like you Tipo into a Pleekly, but then you're setting up these weird combos where Quill would probably just do a better job. Or just like any other consistent form of ramp would do a better job. But yeah, I don't mind the card. I think it's good. I like every Sapphire Steel list that makes it big or is known. I always play it like locally, like actually build it in paper just so I can do videos on it. I don't want to just say that list's trash and not have actually tried it. So I did build it. I played it. I think he's a phenomenal player because I couldn't pilot that. Like I had no idea what I was doing with that one. But yeah, I think Pleekly's not the worst.
Also, why does the Pleekly effect have to be mandatory? That just
Yes.
could have just been a May, but no, you have to do it.
I think it's because like a turn 3, 4. How many of those bodies are there?
Isn't there a vanilla stuff?
Oh, there's vanilla one. There is vanilla one.
Oh, is there a vanilla one?
Yeah,
So that makes no sense then. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting for sure. I always just find it enjoyable when we talk about like some of these Sapphire cards that, I mean, it's kind of been a little bit of a meme, I think, with when we saw all of these reveals as well, where people were talking about, oh, Sapphire Coil, it's like a very, very powerful card, but oh, we don't even run it in our deck because we don't need that. And it's like, I don't know, this meme of Sapphire gets these powerful cards that other inks would probably love to have a similar power level of, and everyone's like, oh, you know, card's a bit mid, it's probably okay, we probably won't play it. And every other ink is like dying for like, please give me something like this, you know?
I couldn't remember. It was one of the Ruby Sapphire players I was talking was like, yeah, but we have to pick which cards we want to pick, which of the broken cards that you want to include, you know, which of the very good ones. And I think as well, Coil, I've only seen it at like 2X's in most people's list.
Yeah,
like,
I don't think
haven't
Coil's broken. It's like also, I don't think like what color would even want a Coil. It's like, I don't think any other deck would really want a Coil.
Yeah, I don't think I'm saying
green.
it. Yeah,
I mean, blue-green can play it. It's in Sapphire. But like, what deck that is not the Sapphire deck would want a Coil?
Yeah, they would definitely not want that card. Yeah.
Yeah. It is just funny because, I mean, yeah, there's also just like the general thing of people hyping up cards like crazy before they've even been. I mean, we can go back to, what was it? Set 3 that you fire? Everyone was like, oh my god, this card is gonna break the game.
I was so excited for Jafar. I remember back on Pixelball. I can say Pixelball on here.
Oh yeah, it's fine. That's fine.
I remember I was so excited for that card. I was like, this card's broken. I remember building it in there, playing one game, and I thought, oh, this is terrible. This is like the worst thing. I remember I like scrapped it, and then I saw like no one else was buying into the hype, and then they released Pete, and the deck's kind of dead in my opinion. But yeah, it was that and Bell Archer.
The green bell, yeah.
The 2 historically bad releases of Lorcana that people are like, the game's gone. There's no point in playing it.
That bell, people lost their minds, yeah.
The 0 to hero.
Oh yeah, some people thought 0 to hero was cracked. Yeah, it's interesting. I do enjoy that. I know you're an enjoyer of memes, Harlan. I enjoy some of your tweets you put up. Oh,
I do like to buy into it because then when the reality comes around, people are like, oh, this Coil was really awkward to play, or or you know. But there is like games I've played where, you know, they'll play Coil and they'll like sing how far I go from like a Hiram that I couldn't remove, double reduce 2, and then play as Big Sisu. I'm like, yeah, that was insane. But like a lot of the time, the card just feels clunky when to play it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I spoke to you, Harlan, as well about it. I was testing Emerald Steel into Ruby Sapphire, and they went the opening of they played the coil on 2, and I had like my morph set up to like shift my beast. I was like, this is terrible. This feels so bad. I'm like shifting a beast for it to literally just die next turn. So I think I had to end up like just playing a Pete or something instead. You know, it was weird.
Yeah, for sure. But I think the cards that are like always really impactful, in my opinion, are stuff that does have an on play.
Mm-hmm.
So like the Tamatoa, in a sense, has its. You're gonna get some, even if it's removed, you're gonna get something out of it. You're gonna return 2 cards to hand, and then if it gets the quest, you gave him more value. And then like Bell isn't really like, I guess, an on. Well, is like, you know what I mean. You banish the Warp School, and then you get a 3/3, and you get it so cheap and early on. And those sort of cards are just always value. Like you can put them in week 1, and I'm pretty sure they're gonna improve your deck.
Yeah, the last time I felt like this was like the Smee. It was just clearly overstated. We've never seen a stat line similar to it. And now it's the same thing with the Bell. What do you mean a 1 cost 3/3? We were like, the next best stat line was like Moana, which is a 1 cost 3/2 that can't even challenge unless you have a pirate.
Yeah.
It's
crazy.
And then also, it costing 3 is just like, I mean, okay, yes. I mean, it's not just a 1 cost 3/3 at times. It's like a 1 cost 3/3 Singer 3.
Yeah.
Like it's just like clearly an upside.
And for it to be a common, and it's like join the ranks of Cinderella and like Diablo, being able to do that turn 2, just you can go into like turn 2 spending like 8 ink worth of stuff. You know, it's gonna be awesome.
For sure, yeah. It is a bit mad, yeah. And like you said, it being a common, like this definitely. I also saw some other memes on Twitter where people were like, best card of the set, and it was basically just the Bell, but they just put the legendary rarity out down below instead of the common. So yeah, good times. But yeah, I think that pretty much closes out the episode. Really happy with all of the discussions that we had surrounding the deck. I also think that it's going to be a super, super strong contender moving into set 7. I guess, honestly, the only other deck that I've seen people experimenting with and trying to make loads of different builds is I've seen a lot of Emerald Sapphire builds trying to be brewed and trying to be cooked. Lots of different versions, some very focused on shifting, not even necessarily including like the yokai package, but there are like a lot of good shift potential that you can have with whether that be, you know, the 1 cost Clarabelle into turn 2 ramp into trying to get get into your shift 5 for your Clarabelle. You play morphs. You've got the new Baymax that has universal shift. So there's some interesting things there, but my biggest struggle when I've been looking at those decks is I just compare it to something like Ruby Sapphire or even Sapphire Steel that has these like clear removal options that can help out so much, whereas within Emerald Sapphire the removal options are like Bruno, you're welcome, let it go, like pretty inefficient removal options. I'd say Bruno's probably the best of them. Mother Knows Best, which again is okay, and you pair that. So like those are the decks I've seen that you pair the muses with that, and maybe you can do something. But the problem is, I just don't think there's enough really good songs in a deck like that. You know, like How Far I'll Go is obviously like a decent song. I do think Heffalumps and Woozles has, surprisingly, it's so funny to me. That's like the one card I was like, oh, this card seems okay. I'll throw it into my Amber Emerald deck. But it's actually a pretty decent song. Like it's okay. It can stop a Hiram from questing and drawing cards and stuff like that. So yeah, those are the builds that I'm finding the most interesting. I do think maybe some people could still crack the Ink Geyser eventually. It might not be this set, it might be in a couple of sets. But yeah, just before we close out the episode, I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on that deck in general. Have you seen any particular builds that have interested you guys, or do you think, you know, it's just more of a time will tell what type of archetype this will be, right?
I think like the Ink Geyser card is like one of those cards they release, and there will be this cult following of people that just love it, and they're just going to constantly try and make it work. Which would be funny if you were doing like a big event, and in Swiss, like you've got your Ruby Sapphire list, and like round 2 or 3, you have to play an Ink Geyser deck. It's just like completely throws you off guard and gets you like a 2-0 or something. But I haven't seen anything. The only other list actually that's not a Sapphire list that I've seen is the Lady and the Tramp list, the Emeralds Amber one. And to be honest with you, even myself, we built that in a proxy. I really liked it, but it's kind of just felt like Amber Amethyst, like the
Just
hyper
aggro, right?
deck.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. You like, I don't even think you need to practice with it. Like, you can pick it up and play it. It makes sense. You get utterly smashed by steel, like, so like a turn 1 Bell is just gonna break it. It gives like Ruby Sapphire a run for its money. Yeah, like that's all it does. I kind of had high hopes for it because it is a pure aggro list, but that one I've put down. I think Ink Geyser probably has more right to be something than the Lady and the Tramp deck does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think to me, Ink Geyser might be the card this set that's like giga overhyped, and I'm not sure it will ever really make its way into like a tier 1 deck.
For this set at least, right? Or do you like?
Yeah. I mean, sure. I'm not. I mean, you never know what the future holds, but like,
Sure.
I think a lot would need to happen for that card to really get strong enough.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I think that concludes the episode. Thank you, Harlan, for joining us and giving us your thoughts on your amazing deck that you've constructed. Also, shout out to Justin as well, I'll say, because I know you guys have worked closely on it. Yeah, so just feel free to shout yourself out where people can find you. We'll put all of your links and stuff down below in the description, of course. But yeah, just let people know where they can find your content.
Awesome, guys. Yeah, thanks for having me on as well. It's always good catching up with you two. Yeah, I've got like the YouTube, Twitter. I post terrible memes on there. And I got like a Metafy. Like, I started a new one with a supporter tier, and it's like very cheap. It's like a couple dollars, and it's all like the benefits just go to charity. And I kind of thought it'd be fun, just put some meta reports in there. You get some other tips and tricks in there. But yeah, it's all the places you can grab me from.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks everyone for watching this week's episode of the podcast. If you liked it, the number one thing you can do is leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, your local podcast platform. It helps so much. There's a video version of this available over at youtube.com/@Podcana podcast. Hit the subscribe while you're there. Twitters are @Harlan Sweete, @Moyen_HS, and @Kawatech_CG. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will catch you in next week's episode.